Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
What will the Chancellor have to say in his first big economic statement? What impact will the forecasters say Brexit will have on the economy next year? And who will face the Front National? First this morning, Theresa May has said Brexit means Brexit many, many times. But can the Prime Minister, who was on the Remain side of the argument during the referendum campaign, be trusted to deliver? Well, Leave supporting Tory MPs are relaunching something called the European Research Group this morning to keep Mrs May's feet to the Eurosceptic fire. And Suella Fernandez is part of that. She joins us now. Welcome to the programme. So, are you worried that you can't trust Theresa May and Philip Hammond to deliver a full Brexit?
I totally trust Theresa May. I'm 100% behind her. She's displayed a massive amount of commitment to making a success of Brexit for the country.
Well, we don't know that yet because nothing's happened. Why then have you formed a pressure group?
Well, we decided to set up this group because we were fed up with the negativity coming out around the referendum and Brexit. I don't feel that way. I feel really positive about the opportunities that we face, and we're a group to provide some suggestions.
Who do you have in mind when you talk about negativity? The Chancellor?
No, I think from the Liberal Democrats, for example, from the some of the Labour MPs.
Right, but this is geared. This is a pressure group to push for leaving membership of the single market and membership of the customs union, correct?
Well, that's what we're proposing, yes.
Right, so it has a purpose rather than just to combat negativity. When it comes to membership of the single market and the customs union, can you tell us what government policy is towards both or either?
Well, rightly, the government hasn't made their position clear, and I think that's the right approach because we don't want to reveal our negotiating hand at this stage in the process.
So
but what
you
we're
can't
saying,
tell us.
what we're saying.
No, I didn't ask what you're saying. I'm asking you, can you tell us what government policy is towards membership of both these institutions?
Well, the government wants to ensure that British businesses have the right to still trade with the with our EU partners, to forge new trade deals with the rest of the world. We heard Theresa May speak at the Mansion House this week, setting out that very good and positive vision for what lies ahead for our country.
But she didn't answer either of these questions, did she?
Well, I think she's been very clear. She said, for example, it's not a binary choice, and I think she's absolutely right.
Well, let's just run that tape, because I want to pick up on what she did say. This is what Mrs May had to say about the customs union at Prime Minister's questions. Let's just see this.
On the whole question of the customs union, of the trading relationships that we have with the European Union and with other parts of the world once we have left the European Union, we are preparing carefully for the formal negotiations. But we're preparing carefully for the formal negotiations. What we want to ensure is that we have the best possible trading deal with the European Union once we have left.
Do you know what she means when she says being in the customs union is not a binary choice?
Well, I think she's right when she says that. At the moment, and you know this, Andrew, as long as we're in the customs union, we can't set our own tariffs, we can't set our own rules, we can't have a free trade agreement with the USA or China. We need to leave the customs union to do that.
But she's just said it's not a binary choice. Binary means either you're in or you're out. So what is it?
But at the same time, we still want to trade with the EU. And I think that we can have a free trade agreement with the EU. So we're still trading.
But that's a separate matter. The free trade, that would be to do with the single market. I'm asking, I don't understand how you can be half in a customs union, do you?
I think that we need to leave the customs union. We do it and we do it properly. And that's how we can get the most out of this amazing opportunity that our country now faces.
So it is a binary choice.
The Prime Minister is right when she says it's not a binary choice.
But
we can leave the customs union.
You both can't be right.
We can leave the customs union, get all the benefits of striking new trade deals, setting out tariffs, negotiating at the World Trade Organization in our own name, and have a free trade agreement with zero tariffs with the EU.
I understand that. So it is a binary choice. Either we stay or we leave. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying that the Prime Minister is right when she says it's not a binary choice, and we have this.
But hold on, you've just said it is. How can the Prime Minister be right and you be right? I mean, I think people deserve clarity on this. You've just said it is a binary choice. We should leave.
Definitely. We're proposing that to get the most out of Brexit, we need to leave the constraints of the customs union. It's protectionist, it pushes up prices. The EU is not securing the right trade deals for this country. And if we want to make the most of it, we need to get out there and get some deals going.
Do you accept that if we remain in the customs union, we cannot do our own free trade deals?
I accept that 100%. And that's why we have to leave. We need to, the protectionism, the common external tariff, the rules associated with the customs union, all stifle trade, innovation and development.
But do you also accept that if we leave the customs union, but stay with substantial access, I don't say membership, but substantial access to the single market, that goods going from this country to the single market, because we are no longer in the customs union, will be subject to complicated rules of origin regulations, which could cost business £13 billion a year?
Well, I would like to see a free trade agreement between the UK and the EU. Yeah. Look at the Canadian deal.
I'm giving you that. But if we're not in the customs union, things that we bring in on our own tariffs once we've left, we can't then just re-export willy-nilly to the EU. They will demand to see rules of origin. Norway has to do that at the moment. It's a highly complicated and expensive business.
But I actually think that if we agree particular arrangements with this, as part of this agreement with the EU, we can reach an agreement on that, which sets a lower standard, which sets a different level of tariff, which protects some of our industries.
But let's suppose we have pretty much free trade with the European Union, right? But we're out of the customs union. And let's suppose that the European Union has a 20% tariff on Japanese whiskey. And we decide to have ourselves, because we're out, we have a 0% tariff. What then happens to the whiskey that comes into Britain and then goes on to the EU? The EU will not let that in.
Well, that's going to be part of the negotiation. I mean, I think there's a huge benefit for external operators to get in here.
It'll be costly because every bottle of Japanese whiskey will then have to work out the rules of origin.
Do you know what? There's been studies which show actually there's a potential for 50% increase in global world product if we leave. We're actually losing the benefits of free trade.
I understand, but I'm asking of a particular, and you have answered with what your view is of the general, but thank you for that. Was it not surprising that Mr. Hammond could not bring himself to say we'd leave the customs union?
What's going on here is very messy. I think the reason that there is this new group of Tory MPs now signing up to a campaign to make sure that we get a genuine Brexit is because there is this vacuum, and it's being filled with all sorts of briefing from the other side. There is a real risk in the minds of Brexit supporting MPs that the Remain side are going to try to hijack the process, not only through the Supreme Court action, which I think most Brexit MPs seem to accept the appeal will fail, but further down the line through amendments to the Great Repeal Bill. So this is a pressure group to try to hold the Prime Minister to account.
Whereas there's plenty of pressure on the Prime Minister effectively to stay in the single market and to stay in the customs union. And if you do both of these things, de facto, you've stayed in the European Union.
Yeah, but I think she's in a sort of difficult position because there is no good faith assumption about what Theresa May wants because she was a Remainer, and I think that's the problem. I mean, there's all this talk, for example, about some kind of transitional EEA-style arrangement. Well, she can't sell that as somebody who is in a Remain. There is, the way that Isabel's characterised it is really interesting. There's almost this betrayal narrative building up already. Everyone is on alert to look to see that she's betrayed this sort of true shining Brexit on the hill.
Since the government cannot give us a clear indication of what it wants vis-à-vis the customs union, which sets the external tariffs, or the single market, which is the free movement of people, capital, goods, services, and so on, others are filling this vacuum.
Absolutely right. And the reason why they're not able to do this, twofold really. First is they don't know whether they can get it or not, and we've seen this with the renegotiation before with the last Prime Minister. You don't ask for what you're not going to get. But secondly...
But what are they hoping to get?
They're hoping to get the world on a stick. They're hoping to get cake and eat it, Prosecco and whatever else Boris
as well,
wants. And the moon is too. They're not just going to limit it to the moon, Andrew. They want everything. But that's the point. You go into negotiating saying, let's see what we can get in
You
total...
think they're going to ask for membership of the single market?
No, I think they'll ask for a free trade agreement which will involve everything, which will involve immigration control, customs union type privileges,
Free trade
the lot.
agreement, you can make your own border controls.
You can, and you can also demand precisely what it is you want from the EU, such as all the benefits in the customs union. The question is, did they stand a cat's chance in hell of actually getting it? And they don't know,
yeah.
which is why they won't say.
Very well. We'll come back to this. We will come back, believe me.
Scotland voted, of course, to remain inside the European Union, and this week won the chance to make a submission to the Supreme Court, which is deciding whether or not Parliament should have a say over when the process of leaving officially begins, Article 50. Well, the SNP warns that Brexit could cause Scotland the loss of up to 80,000 jobs. I'm joined now from central London by Stuart Hoseley, the MP for Dundee East, and the SNP's economics spokesman. Very good morning to you, Mr Hoseley. And just on that Supreme Court and Article 50 and the government's appeal there, Scotland getting involved is, of course, going to complicate matters. Is it just your hope to delay the triggering of Article 50?
No, it's not about delaying the triggering of Article 50. It's about making sure that what the UK government does next is done properly and we get the best possible outcome for Scotland and indeed for everywhere else in the UK. And so I think it's quite right the Scottish Government and indeed others have a say in what happens next.
Some recommendations coming, including from Brexiteers like Owen Paterson, that the government should drop its appeal, therefore revert to the High Court judgment, therefore Scotland won't have its say.
Well, I mean, if the government drop its appeal and the UK Parliament has to vote on these matters, then I think that would be very, very sensible indeed, because it would at least give us all the opportunity to flush out what it is the government think their plan is going to be. As it stands at the moment, this idea that they're keeping their cards close to their chest is simply not believable. I mean, the truth, I think, is more likely that they simply don't have a plan. So let's hear the voices of the public. Let's hear the voices of the parliamentarians to make sure the UK government don't overlook something which is incredibly important for one industry, one sector, one group of people, or indeed the country as a whole. They can't sneak their way to leaving the EU. There has to be a public debate and a parliamentary debate to reflect the wishes of the people's representatives.
OK, so you criticise the government for lack of a plan, but it comes back at you, the SNP government in Scotland, saying, OK, be explicit. What is your thinking about how this might work? If the rest of the UK leaves the European Union, how on earth could Scotland possibly remain in it? You've got some thinking on that.
Oh, there is a huge amount of thinking being done. I mean, you know, the First Minister has put in place a large team of people to work out how the UK can remain part of the single market, and failing that, Scotland remains in the single market. Now, many suggestions have been posited. The announcement will be made at some point reasonably soon. But, for example, if we were to stay in the European Economic Area, we'd remain members of the single market. That, of course, would require us to have free movement of people. We in Scotland and the Scottish Government don't see that as a problem at all. The UK does. So while it might be complicated, there is a way by which we could remain in the single market, trading, not being subject to additional tariffs and all the rest of it. And if the UK wanted to do something different, then there's a way we could make that work. But that would require goodwill on the part of the UK government, rather than this secrecy, this blanket drawing up of an iron curtain saying we have a plan, but we're not prepared to tell anybody what it is.
Well, the Chancellor's prepared to tell us a bit about his economic plan, isn't he, in the autumn statement coming up on Wednesday. And do you think it's the right approach? Apparently a lot of money going to be spent on infrastructure, roads amongst them, to mitigate against some of the effects of Brexit.
Well, let's see what the numbers say, because it strikes us that the debt deficit borrowing figures which were promised in 2010 for 2015 are unlikely to be met until towards the end of this Parliament. So he needs to do something to grow the economy. He also needs, as you say, to take action to mitigate the worst impacts of Brexit, and we've seen numbers on that from the Treasury, from the LSE and from others. And, of course, at the same time, he needs finally to get to grips with the UK's productivity problem. These things are all related. So it means action on infrastructure, quite right, action on innovation, action on exports, action on inclusive growth, making sure people don't fall any further behind. So we'll be paying a great deal of attention to what he says the numbers are, what the forecasts are, and essentially what his specific plan will be.
And can I just ask you, I mean, part of this infrastructure spending includes £369 million on Buckingham Palace. Do you think Scottish voters, Scottish electors should be paying for that?
Well, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a number of issues like that. The Buckingham Palace upgrade, the Houses of Parliament upgrade, which may be some
I'm talking
billions.
about Buckingham Palace. I mean, do you think that's money well spent?
Indeed, but I think the public will take a view on whether spending hundreds of millions on a royal palace is sensible when people are driving over potholes every day or when the trains don't turn up on time. But the SNP will take a view on that when that number's firm and when a decision has to be made.
But you might be able to affect it, won't you? Because if you get the proceeds of the Crown estate devolved to Scotland, then within that, 15% of that goes in the sovereign grant. Could you not withhold that?
Well, I mean, this would be a matter for the Scottish Government, and I haven't heard anybody talk about withholding any of the sovereign grant from the Crown Estate's revenues. I think the bigger issue with the Crown Estate devolution in Scotland is the fact that they're not actually devolving all of it. That's the fundamental issue that's been kind of brushed aside in all of the discussions.
OK, Stuart Hosey, thank you very much indeed. Very good to talk to you there. Stuart Hosey from the SNP, their economic spokesman. And we'll stay with the issue of the autumn statement because, of course, businesses on tenterhooks. What do they want to hear from this autumn statement delivered on Wednesday by the Chancellor Philip Hammond? As we've been hearing over the past few months, they want more certainty. Businesses, of course, the saying is they hate uncertainty. They want more certainty from the government over the plan for Brexit. Well, Paul Dreschler is the president of the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, and he'll set that out again tomorrow at the CBI conference. He's going to argue for what he's calling a smooth Brexit, continued access to Europe's talents and markets. Of course, Mr. Dreschler joins me now from Westminster, and a very good morning to you. Are you worried then to see this idea being pushed by 60 MPs now for a hard Brexit? Just get out altogether, get out of the customs union, get out of the single market, and then Britain can do deals around the world, whatever it wants, really.
Well, look, good morning. Firstly, can I say that businesses right across the CBI membership are totally committed to a successful Brexit, to the best Brexit possible. And what that means is we want to be able to grow jobs, create opportunities for people right across the UK. And we believe that the best way to do that is to do it in a way where we understand not just what the next 1 to 2 years holds, but well beyond that. So we are calling for clarity, a plan, and transition arrangements that will give companies the confidence to invest for the future, to grow and develop brilliant British businesses whose products and services are welcome all around the world.
But this uncertainty,
the best way to do that is by what we would say.
I mean, I just wanted to raise this issue of uncertainty and business. I mean, we're already seeing those effects, aren't we? And I want to ask you if you're seeing it amongst your members. That survey that came out during the middle of last week from the Centre for Economic and Business Research, 1,000 businesses it surveyed, and talked about £65 billion of investment put on hold. That's an economic effect.
Well, of course it is, but what I would say is that businesses are used to uncertainty. That's what we deal with all of the time. What we would look for from this government is to minimise the level of uncertainty at a time when there's a very high level of uncertainty globally, and closer to home, the uncertainty relating to Brexit. We believe that we can reduce that uncertainty by bringing greater clarity to the plan for the short, medium and longer term.
But, I mean, are CBI businesses, are they doing the same thing? They must be amongst these 1,000 surveyed. Are they putting investment decisions on hold?
Inevitably, at a time of great uncertainty, when businesses have to decide where to invest, they will invest in the areas of greatest return and greatest certainty. And I have no doubt that at this time, of course, some businesses are holding off. But meanwhile, other businesses are getting on, making significant decisions, recognising that the UK has a vital and powerful role to play in the world of business. We're already the #1 foreign direct investor in the USA, so we have a well-established footprint globally as business people already.
So do you think the autumn statement, though, can kickstart things or keep things moving if the Chancellor does go for a larger infrastructure spend? But of course that means more borrowing.
I think that the Chancellor will make exactly the right call to ensure that we maintain stability, confidence in the UK and boost growth at a time when there is uncertainty. And the best way to do that today is via increased infrastructure investment and continuing to feed our brilliant innovation and R&D sector, which can create new products, new services and therefore new jobs for the UK. And I'm sure he will focus on those areas, and he has been listening very carefully to the business community to understand the best choices to make for the UK at this time.
I'm sure the business community and indeed you have been listening very closely to what the Prime Minister has been saying since she took on the position about businesses, in particular her warnings about the downsides of globalisation, how that effect doesn't help everyone out in the United Kingdom and that big businesses are sometimes part of the problem.
Well, firstly, I would say big businesses provide 10 million jobs in the UK. That's equivalent to the whole population of Portugal. I think all the evidence will show that global trade has supported growth on a global basis. But what we haven't been able to do as we've grown globally is to offer the benefits of that to people right across the UK and the world. And that's what people are dissatisfied with. And that's why we believe a really good industrial strategy, which is place-based, will ensure that we're able to have better growth outside London and the South East through increased productivity and increased innovation. And when people feel the benefits of that, they'll actually see that free trade globally is a better way for us to operate in the longer term.
But Theresa May's saying more than that, isn't she? She's talked about the unacceptable transgressions of some businesses. She's saying to you and your members, get your houses in order. It's not about an industrial strategy from the government. It's about some of the behaviours and practices of business.
Well, firstly, she is a fantastic advocate of an industrial strategy, but she has challenged business, and I would challenge business. We need people to feel that we care about them, that they are vital to this country, and that we're supporters of people. And there have been transgressions. They have been unacceptable. We do need to do more to call them out, but the vast majority of firms are doing a brilliant job for this country and this nation, and we need to champion them, be enthusiastic about them, and make people believe that the UK is the best country in the world in which to operate a business. That's the way to attract foreign direct investment.
But do you detect perhaps a slight xenophobic tinge to some of what's being said from government, particularly when it comes to a global elite running businesses? I mean, you're part of it, aren't you? You're not a British national, you're an Irish national. I know you've worked for many multinational companies around the world. Many would say you're a benefit to the United Kingdom, but when the global elite is criticised, do you feel the hairs go up on the back of your neck?
I think until people right across the country feel the benefits of leadership from wherever it comes from, they're going to challenge us. And I understand that. But I defy you to find a more exciting city in the world than London that is more welcoming of talent from all over the world. This is a great city. The UK is a fantastic country and has thrived on that diversity. And I believe that our values will sustain us in the longer term, and we will find a way through these current discussions and debates about the balance around immigration and the vital contribution that people make to all parts of our society.
Well, that vital contribution to all parts of society, that then goes right into the issue of the free movement of people within the European Union. Is that something that the CBI, that your businesses want to battle hard to preserve?
Well, I believe when people in this country think about the role that people from the European Union play in our hospitals, in our care homes, in our transport and infrastructure, we will see that there is a balance to be struck to ensure that we get this right for everybody in the long term. But of course, as businesses, we have to compete from the UK on a global basis, and that means having access to the best talent at every level in our organisation to be able to do that.
Mr. Dreschler, thank you very much indeed. Paul Dreschler there, President of the Confederation of British Industry.
Thank you.
It's exactly 150 days since we found out that the UK had voted to leave the EU, but as we've been hearing, Remain and Leave campaigners continue to battle at what kind of relationship we should have with the EU after Brexit. Leave campaigners say that leaving the EU also means quitting the single market, the internal European trading bloc that includes free movement of goods, services, capital and people. They point to evidence that leading Leave-supporting politicians ruled out staying in the single market during the referendum campaign itself. Andrea Leadsom, for example, said it would almost certainly be the case that the UK would come out of the single market. Michael Gove was even more emphatic when asked for a yes or no on whether the UK should stay in the single market. He replied, no, we should be outside the single market. And Boris Johnson agreed with his erstwhile ally, saying Michael Gove was absolutely right to say the UK would be leaving it. But Remainers are now heading back. They've released a video of clips of Leave campaigners speaking before the referendum, apparently saying that the UK should stay in the single market. Nigel Farage, for example, once said that on leaving the EU, we'll find ourselves part of the European Economic Area and with a free trade deal. Owen Paterson, the former Environment Secretary, once made the startling statement that only a madman would actually leave the market. And Matthew Elliott, the Vote Leave chief, said that the Norwegian option would be initially attractive for some business people. But do these quotes create an accurate picture of what the Leavers were saying at the time? So to cast some light on the provenance of these quotes, we're joined by James McGrory. He's director of Open Britain. They released the video. Welcome to the Sunday Politics. On your video, it features 12 statements from Leave campaigners hinting that they wanted to remain in the single market. How many of these 12 statements were made during the referendum campaign?
I don't know, but some of Dan Hanan's were.
Well, actually, not one was made during the referendum campaign. Indeed, only 2 of the 12 statements were recorded after royal assent had been given to the referendum. Only 1 was made this year before the referendum.
Look, throughout the campaign, Leave campaigners lauded the Norwegian model. And as you know, Norway are in the single market, but not in the EU. In fact, the Leave campaign went out of their way not to be pinned down on a specific trading arrangement they wanted to see in the future with Europe. When the Treasury modelled the different models, it was the EEA or a free trade agreement or a WTO.
I understand that, but isn't it interesting, and does it not undermine your case, that none of the 12 statements on your video were made during the campaign itself when people were giving really serious thought to such matters?
Well, the Leave campaign weren't giving really serious thought to such matters. They did not set out the future trading model that they wanted to see with the European Union.
You cannot produce a single video of somebody saying we should stay in the single market from the Leave side during the campaign.
This isn't an exhaustive list. Throughout the campaign, Daniel Hannan talked about the Norwegian model as being a future option.
I mean, one of the comments you used from Nigel Farage dates back to 2009. When we didn't even know if we'd have a referendum or not. Does it not stretch credibility to go back to the time when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister?
I think the point stands. The overall point we're trying to make, this is not supposed to be an exhaustive list of all the options that the Leave campaign...
You would choose the best, wouldn't you?
Well, I think when Daniel Hannan, who's been described as the intellectual godfather of the Leave movement, is saying absolutely no one is talking about threatening our place in the single market, I think it's legitimate to point out that the Leave campaign never came forward with a clear argument.
We highlighted in the graphic a few of the quotes you picked out from Leave campaigners over time, none during the referendum. Do you think that you fully encapsulated accurately their arguments?
Well, I don't think in a 90-second video you can talk about the full spectrum of opinion that they have. Some of them do want to leave the single market. Some of them want to be like Norway. Some of them want to seek a free trade agreement. Others want to default onto World Trade Organization tariffs. What I'm saying is there is a massive spectrum of opinion, even within the Leave campaign.
I understand, but what I was asking was whether you have portrayed them accurately. So let's have a listen to the clip that you used on Owen Paterson first.
Only a madman would actually leave the market.
This is what he then went on to say after saying only a madman would leave the market.
Only a madman would actually leave the market. It's not the EU, which is a political organisation, delivering the prosperity and buying our goods. It's the market, it's the members of the market, and we will carry on trading with the market. I mean, are we really suggesting that the 5th largest economy in the world is not to come to a satisfactory trading arrangement with the EU? Are we going to be like Sudan and North Korea? I mean, it's ludicrous, this idea that we're going to leap off a cliff into a dark space. We will carry on trading.
So what he meant when he said only a madman would leave the market was not leaving membership, which is your implication, but that we would, of course, continue to trade we would continue to have access.
Any country in the world can have access. What the Leave campaign has suggested is that our trade would continue uninterrupted. In fact, they're still at it today. David Davis used the phrase uninterrupted at the dispatch box recently.
But you misrepresented him, didn't you, by saying only a madman would leave the single market, then stopped it there, because he goes on to say that, of course, we won't leave in the sense of continuing to have access.
I don't think he was talking about access. He's there talking about membership.
He doesn't use the word membership at all. He talks about we're going to carry on trading with it. We won't leap off. We'll carry on trading.
Anybody can trade with the EU. It's the terms on which you trade that's important. And Leave campaigners, and Patterson is a classic example of this, suggest that we can trade completely as we do now. The government are saying we can trade without bureaucratic impediments and tariff-free. That's what the government
will
is
make up their mind. Let's listen to the clip that you used of Matthew Elliott. He was the chief executive of Vote Leave. This is what you had him say.
When it comes to the Norwegian option, the EEA option, I think that it might be initially attractive for some business people.
So you then cut him off there. But this is what he went on to say in that same clip. Let's listen to that.
When it comes to the Norwegian option, the EEA option, I think that it might be initially attractive for some business people, but then again for voters who are increasingly concerned about migration in the EU, they'd be very concerned that it allows free movement of people to continue.
Again, you misrepresented him, didn't you? He said the Norwegian model has attractions, but there are real problems if it involves free movement of people, which it does. But you cut that bit out.
I challenge anyone to represent them accurately because they took such a range of opinions. I don't know what we're supposed to do. Some of them
you're
said
misrepresenting. That's what you're doing.
He there is saying that the Norwegian option is attractive to business. I understand why it is.
But he then says, but
it might not be attractive to voters.
People would be concerned if it allowed free movement of people. You took that out.
No, and you're suggesting this is somehow a definitive position that we're now going to have to take.
No, I'm just suggesting that you're distorting. Let's see what Nigel Farage said. This is what you had Mr. Farage saying.
On D+1, we'll find ourselves part of the European Economic Area and with a free trade deal.
And this is what he then went on to say in that same clip that you didn't run.
There is absolutely nothing to fear in terms of trade from leaving the European Union, because on D+1 we'll find ourselves part of the European Economic Area and with a free trade deal. And we should use our membership of the EEA as a holding position from which we can negotiate as the European Union's biggest export market in the world as good a deal. My goodness me, if Switzerland can have one, we can have an even better one.
So there again, he says not that we should stay in the single market as a member, but that we stay in the EEA as a transition until we negotiate something. I mean, the whole clip is online. How did you think you would get away with this distortion?
It's not a distortion. The whole point of the clip is to point out, or the clips, is to point out they don't have a definitive position. He's there arguing for membership of the single market.
No, he's not. No,
for a
he's not.
Transitional period. For a transitional period. Well, how long does that go on? What does he then want to achieve?
Not very quickly, but he's not saying we should stay members of the single market, and you didn't let people see what he went on to say. You gave the impression he wanted to stay in the single market.
It wouldn't be a video then, it would be a 7-week-long lecture. They took so many positions, and the idea now that they were clear with people that we should definitely leave the single market, I think is fictitious.
But you are trying to make out that they all had one position, which was to remain members of the single market.
We are trying to.
And when you see the full clips, that's not what they're saying.
We are trying to make out it's clear that there is no mandate to leave the single market. The idea that the Leave campaign spoke with unanimity and clarity of purpose, and throughout the whole campaign said, we'll definitely leave the single market, is just not true. That is the whole point of the video.
We showed in the montage of the video just before we came, we showed the then Prime Minister, the then Chancellor, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove being categorical that if you vote to leave the EU, you vote to leave membership of the single market. What bit of that didn't you understand?
Under duress, they occasionally said that they wanted.
Well, they all
some of them wanted to leave the single market. I don't see when all the other promises they made, whether £350 million for the NHS, whether a VAT cut on fuel,
you can't produce a single quote of any of these people saying we should remain a member.
Daniel Hannan has constantly praised the Norwegian model. Norway are a member of the single market.
One final question. I mean, you spent the referendum campaign criticising Vote Leave for misrepresenting and lying, and many people thought that they did. Having seen all this, many people will conclude that you're now the biggest liars.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to point out that the Leave campaigns didn't have a clear position on our future trading relationship with Europe. That's all this video does. It doesn't say we've definitely got to stay in the single market. It merely says the Leave campaigns don't have a mandate to drag us out of our biggest trading partner.
Well, now people have seen the full quotes and context. Our viewers will make up their mind. James McGrory, thank you.
I've been